The following presentation was recorded live at the Richmond Marriott in Richmond, Virginia for the 29th Annual International Association of Square Dance Callers Convention. This is tape number 9, Voice 1, Care and Use of Voice.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Arden Hopkin, and I'm glad to be back with you. I'm surprised to be back with you after the faux pas that I committed last year. You know, I really did wonder. I thought that most square dance callers were God-fearing folk, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how come we were having CALLERLAB on Easter. I just never could figure that one out. But the explanation is that I had just become electronic. I'd bought myself a little Palm Pilot, and those of you that might have one of those know that it's easy to put in the wrong date. You know, you take the little stylus and you punch it. So I entered the data and punched what I thought was the right date, and it went on to the week following. From that time forward, I just thought, well, I'm coming on that particular week. So I had bought my ticket, and I was all ready to come and last year. And then I'd been teaching a 10 o'clock class, and I got back up to my office, and there was a call waiting from Jerry, and he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm right here teaching a class." "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, what was it? It was in St. Louis last year." Yeah, I was in St. Louis. He said, "Well, we're in St. Louis." And I said, "What are you doing there? It's not for another week." And he said, "No, it's this week." And at that point, of course, there was nothing to be done about it. My flight just happened to take me through St. Louis. I wondered if I ought to get off and stay there for a little while just to make up for lost time. When I came in last night, there was somebody who said that I probably ought to just tell you all that I've been here for a week and wondering what kept you so long. But that's not what we're here about. We're here to talk about singing. My gosh, there's not enough chairs. But there are, really. Here, let's just take a second here. I've got a fairly big bottom, but I don't need all three of these. So here's a couple of chairs right up here, and there's a couple of two right here. So come on, grab a seat. We're going to be talking for over a couple of periods about things having to do with your voice. I presume that since you're here, you're either doubtful that that's possible to do anything about, or that you're hopeful that there is something that can be done about it. And if you're hopeful that there's something can be done about a singing voice, you're absolutely right about it. There are things that can be done. Now, come on, don't be shy. Just because you're sitting up front doesn't mean that you have to sing first. Or maybe it does. I don't know. We'll decide. Yikes! I don't think I'll move that. Okay, let's just find out about a few things. What you hope to gain from this, so I'll know what lies to tell. What do you want to hope to learn from this session today? Go ahead. Wait.
Ideas about preserving voice.
Formaldehyde works. Just a bottle of it. Okay, so somebody over there said amen. Here's another hand.
Well, that's what I said was amen.
Oh, amen. You're one of the God-fearing ones. Okay.
To be able to get through 4 days of calling and still have a voice at the end of it.
So that you wear down after a while? Okay. Does anybody else have that trouble? You start wearing I see a number of hands going up. Okay. Anything else that anybody cares about? Yes.
I find myself running out of wind sometimes.
The beans will help. Oh. Anything else?
Loosening up your voice before you start.
Some warming up exercises, things you can do to warm your voice up. Okay, that's a pretty good opening shot. We're going to do more than that, but before we leave here today in this session, let's hope that we can cover all of those issues. Then I know that the issue next time has to do with range extension, both for the women to go downward and the men to go upwards. We're sort of seeking unisex here in this field, aren't we? Maybe not. Well, anyhow, the first thing that needs to happen to preserve your voice is for you to get enough rest. Okay, everybody shakes your head and says, okay, fine, thank you very much. We all know that. None of us have enough time to get enough rest, especially if you're involved in something that goes all day and all night, and then you have, in some cases, have to get up the next day and make a living, and then you go and use your voice until 11 o'clock at night, and you do that 4 or 5 nights a week. Yeah, sleep is one of those things that doesn't happen very much. All I can say to you is that you buy yourself a car with an automatic pilot and do as much sleeping on the road as you possibly can between... Never mind. Sleep is really important. The other thing that is really important is to get the right kind of nutrition, to eat reasonably, keep your body in good health as much as you're able to. Those things will have more to do with you living a long time than singing better, but if you're dead, you can't sing anyhow, so that's a good way to just maintain good health. Another thing that you can do along the way is to think positive thoughts, believe it or not. If you have a positive outlook on life, you're likely to communicate that in the way that you use your voice. People that are riddled with self-doubt or riddled with anxiety or anger or frustrations, those manifest themselves in a variety of ways, one of which is what you do with your voice. And if you have a positive outlook on life, and if you have a certain comfort with yourself and a certain positive feeling about what you're doing in the world, then it will most likely manifest itself in a certain calmness in the way that you use your voice, and you won't be fighting against yourself so much. So much of it has to do with where you come from in your lives. There is one more chair up here, and this man's looking mighty lonesome, so no, he isn't. He's looking really comfortable, but there's still an empty chair up here. Okay, good. Well, all right. So the next things that you can do have to do with specific things having to do with singing, how to use your voice. The first one is that you need to understand the principles on which sound is produced in the body. I'd like to sort of walk you through that. The sound machine that we have has 3 parts to it. One of them is an energy or a wind machine. That's our lungs and the muscles that control the inhalation and exhalation of our body, things that we pretty much take for granted, but which scientifically, if you use them right, will lead you to some very, very good success. The second one is a vibrating machine, something that creates the sound that happens because the air passes through your vocal folds. That's the little set of cartilage that is about as long as to your first knuckle, up and down, and it's about as wide around as my thumb is. And in the middle of it are a couple of flaps of skin. They actually are more sophisticated than just some flaps of skin. They have some ligaments, like little rubber bands, right on the inside edge. And they have some flesh that overlaps it. And inside that flesh are some muscles that are used in the singing process. And then there are some muscles that open and close those pieces of flesh. And they're open, you can breathe. When they're closed, you make sound. That's the vibrator. And then you have another 7.5 inches of tube, about 1.25 inches in diameter, and that tube goes from the top of your larynx out to the front of your lips. For men, your vocal folds are about as long as my thumbnail. That's not very long. For you ladies, it's about the length of the fingernail on my little finger. Isn't it amazing that 2 little flaps of flesh about that size can produce such an amazing amount of sound and can work for so long a time? But when you think about it, our larynx is not very much more than a sophisticated duck call. A duck call, when you blow on it, it has little vibrators in there, and when the air passes those vibrators, they make noise and they quack. And they can keep quacking right along. As long as you put air through them, they'll keep quacking. And the sound can carry for quite a distance and attract other quackers to come along and join them. That's a little bit like what you guys do. You just make different kind of quacking sounds, and other ducks sort of flock into your halls and start to dance. In other words, the mechanics of it is really quite simple, and most of it is done below your conscious control. Therein lies the problem, that if you get off onto some bad habits from early on in your life, those habits will stay with you for most of your life. And all of you know that changing habits can be a downright nuisance. It's a significant challenge to change anything in your life. I write left-handed, and as I was a young man, I was one of those that wrote upside down, backwards, so that my hand wouldn't smear the ink. Well, I learned when I was writing my master's thesis, 100 pages, and doing that, and it was before computers were invented, I decided that that was the wrong way to write. And so starting at that point, when I was in my mid-20s, I started to learn how to write left-handed the way left-handers are supposed to write, and yet nobody teaches you. And I now do that, but nobody can read my handwriting anymore because I've changed one aspect of it, but you can't change the other aspect of it. Habits are hard to change. Same thing will be true for many of you as you think about some of the things that I'm going to introduce to you today. That doesn't mean that they can't be changed. It just means that you need to be fairly persistent and patient with yourselves in the process of change. I also want to note that when somebody makes a change, it usually isn't at a sharp right angle curve. It's a big sloping curve, meaning that your intent starts at one point and then your behavior gradually sort of catches up, and pretty soon you're going the right direction. So expect that of yourselves. Expect that the changes that I might introduce to you today, and as you come up and demonstrate, you'll walk away saying, oh, that was so exciting, and I've got it, and I'll do it from that point forward. But you probably won't. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't persist at it, because the change will be beneficial to you. All right, now the next thing that is important to say, having outlined the three parts of the whole vocal system, yikes, okay, we got more chairs. Now we just blow the back wall out and we'll be all set. Or if there's some of you that can come up here and grab a hold of this table, I tried to move it and it didn't want to move because it's actually sitting on a box. It's two, oh, that's the reason, it's two tables. So if somebody can help move those things back, if we'll just slide this thing back to the wall, then we'll have some room for chairs, and I don't need to stand behind a table. I can stand out in front. That'll give us a little more room for folks to sit on. So let's start off initially with, just everybody, instead of bringing the chairs up front, if everybody come one step forward. Oh, I can already tell that the reason I'm supposed to stand behind the table is so that this thing won't talk back to me. Okay, so let's slide forward. I've got a couple of pieces of paper that I'm going to use. This gets a little tricky sometimes when I'm trying to hold a microphone and do this little demonstration. Those of you who have been here before, have seen this demonstration, but I'm going to add an extra little wrinkle to it. The first demonstration, this is an aerodynamic demonstration. You would assume, if you knew nothing about aerodynamics, that if I've got two pieces of paper here and I blow between them, the air would blow the paper apart. That makes perfectly logical sense, except that logic doesn't apply in this case because there are some laws of aerodynamics that are really important. They're the same laws that brought all the airplanes, flew you here. They're also the same laws that make chords work. And here's what it looks like. I honestly did. There's a red light blinking. The battery's low. So I'm going to go over here. This one now? Okay. Now this is long enough to go underneath my arm. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to blow between these two pieces of paper. Watch what happens. It's a little magic trick. It's called the Bernoulli effect. And it's simply the evidence that when air is in motion, it creates suction. Now you can see what the implications of that might be as it relates to your vocal cords. These yellow sheets of paper that I'm holding before you are somewhat akin to your vocal folds, except that they're much bigger and the vocal folds are stretched across a more contained opening. But there's more to this little demonstration. Watch. You see the movement of the sheets of paper? In essence, that's kind of what your vocal folds do. You have more control over your vocal folds than these pieces of paper, but the principle is the same. If you have air moving between two objects and you get the air moving quickly enough, it will create a suction that will draw them together and cause them to vibrate. That's kind of a passive phonation. Here's the next thing I wanted to show you. You saw the principle at work. Now watch. I'm going to blow less hard. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Oh, there's something happened. You see, I had to change the pressure, the speed of the air. Okay, now it's sort of working. But there's still nothing happening. They're not flapping. Why? Why would you say they're not flapping? That's right. There's not enough air moving. And it isn't just quantity of air. It has to do with the speed of the air that creates the suction sufficient to make this thing successful. Now I'm gonna ask you all to kind of rub your teeth like I'm doing. That gives you an idea about how far apart your lips should be. It has nothing to do with whether you brushed your teeth this morning. It's just to help you to feel how far apart your lips are. Now watch. You do it. Your lips are a whole lot bigger than your vocal folds are. But you notice that even when your lips are apart, if you hit the right breath stream, even your lips will vibrate together. The same principle applies to your voice. I'm going to give you a demonstration, and then I want each one of you to join with me in this demonstration. And then actually, we're going to pause right here and invite. Is there anybody here that has a record that would be willing to be a demonstrator? Did you not come with anything to use today? Well, if anybody wants to go grab one, this would be an opportunity to get a little extra time. Okay, so here's the demonstration. Hear how breathy that sound is? I want all of you to make that kind of a sound as if you were just sighing. That's very good. Some of you need to brush your teeth, but otherwise that's very good. Okay, now watch this. I'm going to maintain the feelings of relaxation in my throat, but I'm going to change the airstream. Watch. Hear it change? Comes a full sound after a while. There is a graph that I use when I teach my teachers of singing, teach my vocal pedagogy students. And that is that there are two elements in your voice. One is musculature. There has to be a certain amount of musculature that's working in your throat to bring your vocal folds together so that they're not so wide open as if you were breathing. And then there is their aerodynamic energy. And if you had a quantity of 10 that you could apply, and you had to divide it between those two sources of energy, the maximum energy you had was 10. If you started out with all 10 units of energy over in the aerodynamic side, here's what you'd get. No sound. On the other hand, if you took all 10 of those units and put them over on the muscular side, here's what you'd get. No sound. Because the vocal cords would be drawn so tightly, and there would be no sound that could pass between them. So now let's play that game a little bit. You do the math inside your heads. If you've got 10 units of energy in the aerodynamic side and 0 units of energy in the muscle side, and you multiply those together, what do you get? 0. You get no sound. By the same token, if you've got 10 units over on the muscular side and 0 units in the aerodynamic side, you get no sound. 0. But now let's say that you've got 9 in the aerodynamic side and 1 unit in the muscle side. So there's just a little bit of contraction. What do you get? 9. The output is 9. So now let's say that there are 8 units in the aerodynamic side and 2 units in the muscle side. What kind of sound do you get? 16s. Almost double the sound. You heard it in me. That's 9. All of a sudden it starts to pick up a little bit. All it takes is the vocal folds to be drawn just a little bit together. So 7 and 3. 21. We're getting better all of a sudden. How about 6 and 4? 24 units of sound. That's good. 5 and 5? 25 units. So you can see, then you start reversing it, and now it's 4 units of aerodynamic and 6 units of muscle. It's still 24. So you get a bell curve. Goes from 0 to 9 to 16 to 21 to 24 to 25 to 24 to 21 to 16 to 9 to 0. If just using simple numbers, we could get more sophisticated if you want to, but it's an exact bell curve. Most everybody, to be efficient in some degree of value, need to be in that 21, 24, 25 range. Some spend their lives in the 16 side. Okay, so enough of that little stuff. That just to make sure you're awake. We'll have a quiz on that after we're finished here today. Okay, so now let me go back to what I was saying. I just wanted to give you a sense that there's more going on than just air, that it has to do with the way that your vocal folds work, as a matter of fact. Oh, somebody took me at my word and went and got a record.
That's right.
Come on up. What is your name, please?
My name is Lilia.
Okay, Lilia is going to come up. And we're going to just deal with that single unit all by its little lonesome self, aerodynamics. Now, there is a threshold at which your vocal folds will spontaneously vibrate. While you're setting up, I'll just keep talking. And I'll probably keep talking long after you're set up, just to sort of leave you hanging out there. There is a threshold that even if your vocal folds were at complete rest, where you normally breathe in and out, that way, if I could generate enough aerodynamic energy from inside my lungs, even at rest, my vocal cords would start to vibrate. The suction would be sufficient to draw them closed from their at-rest position. Unfortunately, our lungs aren't created that way. We don't have quite the capacity to keep doing that. It takes so much breath that we would run out, and it would become inefficient. We couldn't make it to the end of our phrases. Okay, so a certain amount of closure in the vocal folds is essential. However, most of us live our lives living below that threshold. You saw the point at which, when I started to blow, the paper spontaneously started to flap in the breeze. And that below that threshold, they may have been drawn together, but they really firmly weren't activated. Well, there's a threshold that everybody has to find for themselves. And I'd like you to experience that just the way that I demonstrated it to you. And then, Lilia, and then we're going to have Lilia sort of be the voice for all of you. I'm going to do the exercise with her again after you've experimented with it. So here we go. Start sighing. Now, with that easy, relaxed feeling in your throat, add more breath energy. See, already there's more sound. More breath energy. And more. And one more. Now, some of you at that point started to push. Wrong choice. Just leave the easiness in your throat. Let the air make up the difference. Go. Okay, now listen to me do that. You can hear a point at which my voice becomes fully efficient. Oh, that's an improvement. Right there is where it hits full efficiency. Now, you tell me, what was the difference in the sound that you heard? Raise your hand. I'm sorry.
Less air.
Lilia says less air. There was no leak, was there?
Correct.
Now, why was that? Why would it not leak, even though I was using more breath? Anybody want to venture a guess? That is exactly the right answer. There is a sufficient amount of suction so that the vocal folds are sucked entirely closed. And for a very brief moment, no air is escaping. Then, of course, the air pressure building up underneath them is sufficient to part them, blow them apart, and the air rushes through, the suction is created, and they snap closed again. This happens hundreds of cycles per second. But nevertheless, the principle is the same, that there is an opening and closing that is very aerodynamically driven, not muscularly driven. And if you are below that threshold where that spontaneous closure happens completely, then air is leaking. Or, and here's what is more common for most of us, we start out with the assumption that we want a clear tone. We don't know about the aerodynamic issue, and so we tighten up our vocal folds. That's called a vocal valve. And we tighten it up a little bit to compensate for the inadequacy of breath. All of a sudden, we get a clear sound, but it has some undesirable elements to it. It sounds sometimes tight. It sometimes can sound harsh. It limits our ability to go into high range because the vocal folds are stiffer than they ought to be otherwise. And we tire more quickly. Does that sound like anybody you know? Yeah, so now we're going to use Lilia as our experiment. Would you first put your record on? You've got it there. But without any coaching from me, I want you to just sing the first phrase or two of that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about this whole issue of aerodynamics, and then have Lilia go again and see if you can tell a difference in her sound. Is it wired down? Turn it off and pull that apart, and no. There is. I think that was somebody's way of saying, we don't want Arden to be making any record noises in there. The room's too small. All right. So without any coaching, here goes Lilia.
Here's the voice volume. There. Okay.
All right, here we go.
Circle left. Do what you do well, boy. Do what you do well. Well, you element up that corner, come back, do-do. The men star left, around you go.
Tone was clear, wasn't it? But Lilia, the way that you got that tone clear was to tighten up your voice to compensate for an inadequacy of breath flow. Hence, the sound that came out of Lilia's voice was very clear but somewhat edgy.
She's scared. You don't perform with callers who've been singing hundreds of years, more experience than I have.
Yeah, I was going to say that too, but I wanted to be invited back another time.
Well, I paid
So
anyway.
now, Lilia,
Yes.
I want you to do the exercise that you just did in the back of the room. Maybe you didn't do it because you were out getting a record.
Probably, yeah.
Good. So she's going to be brand new at this. You all know what the answer to the question is. So Lilia, will you sigh? That's very good. You did do this exercise. All right. Now sigh again. Lots of breath leaking out there, but a very easy production. Now just keep your throat in that same relaxed position and increase your airflow. Make more breath pressure. That wasn't exactly the sound I was looking for.
That wasn't the sound I was trying to do. There's somebody else.
Some sounds just sort of come out spontaneously. Keep coming. Now you still keep easy in your throat, right? This is a mystery for Lilia right now.
I'm way out in left field.
No, you're not at all.
Oh, okay.
I want you to try it again. She thinks that the objective is to keep breathy. It's not. It's just keep it easy in your throat. I'll do it and then I'll have you do it once. You can hear that I still keep easy in my throat,
Yeah.
but I increase the breath energy through my vocal folds. Good. More intense. Now you're getting there. Come on. That's all right. You're going. That's right. Keep on. Now she's starting. Now she's starting to hit the breath. She's not there yet. There's still a little leak. Yikes, that's it. Okay. Now she says, I don't know what the devil I did to do that, but I was determined to get the sound I was supposed to get because I'm as embarrassed as I can possibly be.
You read my mind.
But you know what? You were successful. Now, did you
I have
find
to
that?
remember
You
how
hit
it
that
feels.
threshold? Yeah, that's the whole point. You have to know what it feels like.
And I have to remember it.
Do it again. More. Now inadvertently, what Lily is doing is changing her airstream. She doesn't mean to, but she starts, and then it sounds a little bit too aggressive, or she thinks, my gosh, this is so much breath, I'm going to run out of breath, I better save a little bit for later. And immediately when that happens, with that easy, relaxed throat, it turns breathy on her again. But you know what, Lilia? If you'll use your breath constantly, that is the most efficient you will ever be. Using more air actually will allow you to sing longer than using less.
So then you store, where do you store that air supply?
Where you got lungs,
Yes.
and that's where it stores. But you know what? You don't store it, you use it. It's like love. If you give it away, you have a lot more of it. So, ha. Come on, let it pour out. Come on. That's it, more. All right, now the only thing that's bothering Lilia is that it's making a little bit too much noise. It's a little too aggressive. And Lilia doesn't wish to sound aggressive, but the truth is, if you can learn that feeling, you can sing, and people will think, my gosh, that's not aggressive. That's really nice to listen to. It's the tighter sound that sounds aggressive. It's the tighter sound that makes people say, is she mad at me? I don't mean to make that wrong turn. It's a quality of sound. It's a release in the vocal folds that really makes it happen. Okay, so we're still going one more time. Ah. At the bottom of the... That's the sound. Okay, now if you can hold on to that, do you know what the opening phrase of the song is? You got it from memory? Without the record on, sing it. Using that much better.
Do what you do well, boy. Do what you do well. All of your love and all of your heart singing. I lost my breath.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, do it again, please.
Do what you do well, boy. Do what you do well. All of your love and all of your heart singing. Do what you do well.
We're going to put the record on, and then we're going to invite some comment from the audience.
Circle left. Do what you do well, boy. Do what you do well. All of your love and all of your heart singing. I lost it.
Didn't you? And she knew exactly, and you knew exactly at the moment where that happened. That's a real common issue, and that's what our next session is going to have to do with, and that is, when you go higher, everybody, because they're used to using too little air, knows that the way you get high notes is that you tighten up. The problem is, that's what exactly it sounds like you've tightened up. And there comes a point at which you can't get any tighter, and the end of your range stares you right straight in the face, almost always 2 notes below where you want it to be. So the trick is that there is a sensation. I'm going to get you to talk a little bit about what the sensation of being on breath threshold is. We don't want to know how you psychologically feel about it, but we want you to know how you feel about it physically.
Okay, the question again?
The question is, how does it feel? Does your voice feel differently when you finally hit that threshold where your vocal folds vibrate spontaneously?
Yes, it does.
Describe it to them.
For me, I heard my pitch go. I also felt like I was fighting for a breath when I should be using it. It felt strained.
Gee, all of these sound like negatives.
Oh, they weren't supposed to be negatives?
No.
They were honest.
Yeah, they are honest. But the probability is that if Lilia goes away from here with those negative sensations, she'll say, forget that.
No.
I don't want to do that. In other words, there are some other things there. There's got to be some positive benefit associated with this, or why would you ever want to adopt it?
Okay, well, I feel that I need to have more support for my breath. I know that I need to think about where those notes are going to be and to plan ahead.
All of those are positive answers. Now let's turn again to the physical sensations of when you're on threshold and when you're not on threshold. So this time, sing your normal way. Do what you do well.
Do what you do well, boy. Do what you do well. You mean
Know what
before?
that feels like? You know, you got a feeling sensation to that?
Yes, I do.
Now bring your breath energy up and see what happens.
Do what you do well, boy. Do what? I don't think I changed anything. It didn't feel like I changed anything.
Did you change anything?
Oh, really? You could see it? Okay.
No, it wasn't that we could see it. We could hear
You could feel. Okay.
Hear it.
Okay.
Describe to Lilia what it is that you're hearing. Hang on. Wait. It sounds richer. It sounds fuller. And yet, you're not working harder, except that you are working harder to get more breath flowing, right?
Well, I heard more volume. I guess I was trying to equate volume with the other.
The threshold.
Yes,
You are
exactly.
correct about that. That is usually what happens, is that you get more volume, but more volume without having to work so hard, not have to strain for it.
Okay.
It just is a byproduct of hitting that threshold. Okay. Are there any other observations? Richard, fuller, more poppy. It sounds a little bit more confident, or maybe a lot more confident. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time with lady callers in one session tomorrow, and this is going to be one of the areas where we're going to focus for lady callers, is to how to make your breath move so that your voice doesn't have to be tight. Yeah. Okay, the question is, where does the breath come from? Do you force it with your neck, or do you force it from some other place? And the answer to that question is, it comes from your lungs. The muscles that control your lungs are what we're going to talk about here in just a minute. And the answer is that you do manage your breath with the muscles of your body and not the muscles of your throat. Whereas many people, in a way to compensate for an inadequacy of breath flow, use the muscles of their throat to try to pinch their vocal folds together to make do with a smaller amount of breath. You have all had the experience of blowing up a balloon as children, pinching the neck of the balloon and having it go squeak, and it sounds really sweet, sort of. If a balloon. Well, no. And then you get down to where the end of there's not quite enough air pressure in the balloon, and then you get this kind of a sound. Squeak, as you pinch the neck of the balloon tighter to make do with less and less air pressure. And that last sound is a little bit like some square dance callers who are making do with too little breath and are tightening up in their throat to make the compensation. Okay, thank you, Lilia. Thank you very much. There may be others of you who, if not in this session, in other sessions, will want to be prepared just in case I need some people to demonstrate. Nevertheless, let's go back, because Lilia was trying to answer the questions that I had. What's the matter? You look worried. The mic is dead. New battery would be in order. So all of this that's been going on hasn't been recorded? Oh, no. All right. Yeah, it's popping at me. At any rate, there are some sensations that you can identify. I'm going to ask each of you to do the exercise again with me, and then I'm going to ask for your responses. Okay? So start in a sighing voice. What does that feel like? Give comment, please. It's very relaxed. That's one comment. Any other comments? Where do you feel the vibrations? The lady in the back says vibrations. She's touching her chest. That's right. Easy, low, but that's because we're at a low range. Okay, now let's do it. Bring a little more breath energy to that relaxed throat. What does it feel like? Any change in sensation? Beginning to get some vibrations in the head. Any other sensations? Thank you. It's all. Okay, that's now. I still have to stay back behind this machine, or it'll squawk at me, won't it? Now, there, oops. All right. I feel claustrophobic back here. I have to get out and walk a little bit. Okay, so, a little more breath, please. Ah. What are you getting? Lots of vibrations, and where are the vibrations coming from? Sort of here in the chest, it's sort of like here. Oh, in that general area, right? Yes. Down into the chest, up into the head, across near your mouth. A little more vibration, a little more breath energy. Ah. I'm still hearing some leaking. We haven't gotten to the point where some of you are hitting that threshold yet. Now, are there any changes in vibration when you finally hit that point where your vocal cords are vibrating completely? As somebody said smoother. There's more intensity in vibration. Do you still maintain that sort of easy feeling in your throat? Yes, I would hope. Now, we're just doing it down in a low, comfortable range. What happens if we raise the pitch? Ha, 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 ha. You can feel that the same results are there. There is a sensation that when you hit that threshold, it's as if you are riding on a cushion of air. Does everybody remember the picture of Marilyn Monroe's skirt when she's standing over the subway? Yeah, that's what your voice should feel like. Like, woo! No, that your voice, or if you've been to a hardware store and seen ping pong balls riding on these streams of air, that ping pong ball should be your tone. And the interesting thing about it, all of you identify that it takes more breath to do this. You have to use more breath. One of the things that I didn't get a chance to talk to Lily about, because the phrases that she sang were too short and we only did 2 phrases, was that even though she was moving, what would you say, Lilia? 4 times as much breath? Would you guess? Probably. Yeah, way more than you're used to using. Probably literally wasn't 4 times, but it felt like 100 times more breath. She still didn't run out of breath. And that's the interesting reality about hitting this breath threshold, because it is at the point of breath threshold where your breath is at its most efficient usage. Below that, and one of 2 things happen. Either your voice leaks this way, and you run out of breath because you have too little breath, or the alternative is that you can hear the leakage, the breathiness, and you tighten it up, and then all of a sudden you're having to fight your breath through a very small opening, and the muscles get tight, and you feel like your phrase won't last as long because you're under too much pressure. You're working too hard. So that's coming back to the answer to the question that you mentioned. How do you control this breath stream? Do you pinch it down in your throat? And the definite answer is no. That is the wrong direction to do that. How do you then manage your breath? Well, let me describe what happens to your breath. You look worried. He's fine. Should I be worried? Okay, he's going to flip the tape. Okay. Let's see, where was I? Oh, yeah, you're talking about how do you manage this breath. Your lungs are like big balloons. They have a certain amount of elasticity in them. They're enclosed inside a rib cage, which in itself also has a certain amount of elasticity to it. And at the floor of your lungs is a muscle called the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a very thin, sheet-like muscle that has fibers that come starting at the ribs and run up toward a center dome. When those fibers flex, they shorten. And as they shorten, the central bed of the diaphragm lowers. It drops. And that means that there's more volume, space, available in the upper part of your thorax, in your body. Your lungs, which have a certain volume of air in them even when they're at rest, have more space in them. Wasn't that slick? There's more room in your rib cage than there was before. So the lungs, being a balloon-like substance, respond to air pressure. The air that I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let me back up. When your lungs are at rest, the volume of air that's in there is equal to the air pressure that's out in the world. So all of a sudden your diaphragm lowers and your rib cage opens and there's more space. Now all of a sudden there are too few molecules of air for the volume of space, and so the air pressure is significantly unbalanced. There's more pressure outside the world, in the world, than there is inside your body. So with no effort on your part, the air molecules will rush in your mouth, rush in your nose, and seek to equalize that pressure so that what's inside is equal to what's outside. Okay, so now you get a big tank of air, and the pressure is the same inside and outside your body. When you go to exhale, when the diaphragm starts to relax and return back up into its normal position, there's now all of us, and your rib cage starts to return to its normal size. And also, the natural elasticity of your of the lung tissue, once stretched, will want to return to its normal position. So there's a natural elasticity that helps the air exhale. And as the elastic rebounds, so to speak, returns to its place of rest, air molecules are expelled out through the throat until there's equal pressure again. You're all looking like you're zoned out. Who cares about the science? What's really going on is that you breathe, you inhale and exhale by trying to maintain equal air pressure. And when you make more space, when your diaphragm goes down, the air comes rushing in, reoxygenates your body, and when your body wants to get rid of the carbon dioxide, then your body contracts, sends those molecules out again, and replaces them with new oxygen. That's how we breathe. But it's a very natural process, and it has less to do with muscles and more to do with aerodynamics. Okay, having said that, you take this inhalation. Everybody do that. Breathe through your nose. I can see we've got some more to talk about here in just a minute about what muscles should be really bringing air in your body. But you bring that air in, you're full, your lungs say, thank you, and all of the corpuscles in your body say, thank you, I needed that oxygen. Now get rid of the carbon dioxide, and the muscles spontaneously contract, and the air is expelled to be replaced by other air. It's during the first 4 seconds of a singing phrase, all you really have to deal with is the natural elasticity movement of the contraction back to normal position. Unfortunately, most square dance calling phrases are more than 4 seconds long, so you have to manage your breath purposefully in at least for the last several seconds. And if you happen to be one of those show-offs who wants to phrase it so that you sing 2 or 3 phrases in a row, then you're going to really have to manage your breath. And how do you manage it? It has to do with a muscle called your diaphragm. I've just described it to you as the muscle that when you inhale, it flexes downward, and that when you exhale, it relaxes back up into its position and sort of controls the shape and size of your thorax. When you're trying to maintain breath energy over a period of time, it's your diaphragm that needs to be the participant. Instead of it going back into its comfortable, relaxed position, it needs to be taught to stay in its lowered inhalation position. Singers for generations have used the phrase to drink in the tone or to exhale as if you were inhaling. In other words, the process of keeping your diaphragm in its low position is the learned skill, and you have to learn how to do it. I need a volunteer. Don't everybody jump at once. Come on up. And leaf? Oh, the shaking leaf. All right, we're coming on. No, I thought he was just going to walk right out the door. He's going to make like a leaf and blow. Okay, now, let's see. This is Butch. Butch Adams. Okay, Butch, I want you to make a fist and push yourself right here in the solar plexus. Each one of you can do this exercise on your own. When you inhale through your mouth, I want you to watch what happens. You're pushing there a little bit, but don't push too hard. I want you to watch what happens when you breathe in. Go. Butch's goes out. Does anybody else's not go out? Raise your hand if the fist that you made right here at your solar plexus doesn't go out. Okay, then you're getting your air in. You're changing the space of your lungs some other way. Would you put your hand on your fist on your solar plexus and breathe again? And you are Sandy. Okay, now Sandy is getting her air in by changing the upper part of her rib cage, by raising and lowering her rib cage. And it works, doesn't it? You want to know a secret? It doesn't work as well as this other way. She's still alive, so it's not terrible. And she's a successful caller, so it's not terrible to that degree. Okay. But there's more that can happen, even in a person like as advanced as Sandy is. Now, you see that solar plexus? It moved when you inhaled, didn't it? You also see that in Butch's case, his upper chest is moving as well. That means, like Sandy, he's using more than one way to get the breath in. The dilemma is that if you understand the body's physiology, your thorax is created by a rib cage, and the ribs are attached to the spine at the back and the sternum in the front, clear down to about the 8th or 9th rib. So that part of your rib cage is kind of like a cage. It's kind of like fixed. It doesn't expand and contract the same way. At the bottom of the rib cage, however, are floating ribs. The 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th ribs are by degrees more and more flexible, so that the bottom of your rib cage can open and close much more readily than the upper part of your rib cage can. You can see that on Butch, because when he breathes, well, let's try that again. Don't do that part. Says, I think I'm supposed to use the upper. Now just make your fist move when you breathe. That's right. Now, when he's doing that, the muscle that is actually at work is his diaphragm. That's how you can feel the diaphragm in motion. When it inhales, you get an expansion right around the bottom of your ribs. If you don't get that expansion around the bottom of your ribs, you're not using your diaphragm to breathe with. You have found some other way to keep yourself alive. Why is the diaphragm the preferred way to do it? Because it is the most flexible part of your thorax. It is the part of your body that can be taught to stay flexible all the way through the exhalation cycle and give you longer breath, give you longer access to your breath. Okay? So now the trick is, make that thing go out. There it is. Now I want you notice that when he breathes out, it goes in. His fist goes in. Now here's the exercise, Butch. I want you to put your fist there, and as you exhale, I want you to keep your fist out. Could you? Okay, now do it again. This time form an SH. Form an SH? An SH. Shh, that kind of a sound.
Oh.
Yeah, but your fist is going in.
Oh.
That was a different strategy, wasn't it? Describe what it felt like between when your fist went in and when your fist stayed out.
I'm surprised I still had air. I didn't think.
Lo and behold, yeah, because you thought you had to contract it, didn't you? Now this time, purposefully contract it. Let's. Somebody got a stopwatch or a watch? Let's just watch how this goes. Inhale. Now wait, you're using this upper chest thing. I want you to make your fist move. Okay, now go ahead and contract it. And make an SH. Do it one more time. It's about 4 seconds, maybe 3.5, 4 seconds. Okay, now he's going to keep his fist out. He's going to try to keep that fist from contracting inward. Don't let it collapse. Don't let it collapse. I got big ribs. 5.5. All right, now there's the beginning. I was looking for some hard object, and the only hard object I could find was the Gideon Bible in my room. And I don't mean any insult. It was just the only thing I could find. So, Butch, now I'm going to come over and get you to lean up against a wall using the Bible as the thing that props you up. Actually, there's a wonderful metaphor here. You're going to lean on the Bible. I'm going to show you how to do it.
Oh.
You can see me leaning up against the wall. Stand aside just a little bit, Butch, so everybody can see. This is an exercise you can do to isolate your diaphragm and learn how to use it. It's called a diaphragmatic push-up. And then
you notice I didn't ever let myself collapse into the wall? You thought I was collapsing into the wall?
We were going to give you CPR.
No. Yeah, but I had to learn how to do that. And now Butch is going to get to try that, because there are some muscles that I haven't talked to you about. They're called the muscles of exhalation. They're your abdominal girdle of muscles. There is a 3-layer sheet of muscles going across your abdomen, the fleshy part here where there aren't bones. And those 3-ply are like 3-plies of a tire. The fibers go one direction, then the next one goes the opposite direction, and the third one goes across this way. So they kind of keep you from getting herniated quite so quickly, and the fibers separating. They overlap each other. Their sole task is to help you to expel air. So most of us aren't aerobically active enough, so we don't use those muscles as much as we ought to. And for many of us, those muscles have started to atrophy and sort of hang out a little bit. And so the actual movement of those muscles is in this way. And they start right up here, just above your ribs, right here. And the plies go all the way down into your pubic region. And they're meant to contract inwards and hold your stomach and your intestines inwards to give you a firm and fit form. But more particularly, they're the muscles that when they contract, they push up underneath the diaphragm, so that as the diaphragm starts to relax up into its normal upward position, that it has some upward pressure. So you actually have the action of a bellows at work. Your diaphragm pulls air in, and the abdominal muscles expel air. And Butch may feel his abdominal muscles for the first time in his life today, here. Come on over here. No, probably not, because he looks like a pretty fit and hearty fellow. You saw how I put myself up against the wall, right? Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm finding the little division in his ribs. He's got the book a little bit in the low position. It's right about there. It's about 2 inches. You find where your breastbone ends and your ribs start to part, and you come down from there about 1.5 inches or 2 inches, and that'll be the place where you can find the action of your diaphragm most readily. Okay, have I got it in about the right place? Okay, now he's standing pretty comfortably right now. I want you to put your feet further away from the wall so that you're absolutely leaning on that book. Oh, that's not nearly leaning enough. Now, you may just want to hold the book just in case it slips and you bump your nose. All right, now he's leaned up against that wall pretty well. Would you inhale, and as you inhale, bring yourself away from the wall? You see, he's using other muscles other than his diaphragm. Now relax. Without doing any breathing at all, just push yourself away from the wall. That's his diaphragm at use. He's not using it to breathe with, he's just flexing it. And just do that 3 or 4 times. Don't breathe at all. Just push yourself away from the wall. Just push yourself away. The diaphragm is the only muscle in your body that will allow you to do that. It's actually the only muscle that between your shoulders and your pubic bone that when it flexes, it moves that way. Have you ever thought about it? All the other muscles move upwards, defying gravity. But that muscle moves downward and outward. And so here you go again. Just do a couple of diaphragmatic push-ups. He's not doing any breathing right now. He's just flexing his diaphragm. You can do that same thing. You all have Gideon Bibles in your rooms. Or you can create for yourselves a little wooden block or any other hard-bound book. And you can teach yourselves how to find your diaphragm by just doing this exercise. Now, as you inhale through your nose, push yourself away from the wall and release. And do it again. And again. You'll notice that as he does this, he's beginning to isolate his diaphragm, and you don't see as much rise and fall in the upper part of his ribs. Sandy, you get to be next up here in just a second. Oh, yeah. Okay. Good. Now comes the trick. Now, I want Butch to form an SH and say that SH while keeping himself away from the wall. Keep yourself pushed away from the wall. There'll come a point, right about now, that he's out of common breath, and something down in here is having to start to tuck up underneath in order for you to stay away from the wall. I'd like to introduce you to your abdominal muscles. They were just presenting themselves for your scrutiny right there. Would you do that again? For the first 3 or 4 seconds, that's easy for him to do because there's a natural elastic rebound going on. And then you hit stasis, and at that point, you have to start applying pressure from underneath. Come on, you're not out, you're not out. Keep tucking, keep tucking, keep tucking. Ah, there you go. Okay, thank you, Butch, very much. Come on, Sandy. Please. Would you please? Yes.
When you inhale and exhale, is it inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth?
No, not really. I had him inhale through his nose because most of us have stopped up noses. And so that's another way that you can discover your diaphragm if you don't have a Gideon's Bible close at hand. And that is just stand at ease. Everybody stand up for a second. We're going to take a little detour here and talk about singing posture. Would all of you sort of reach up in the air like you were picking apples? Now, take those apples and put them in your pockets, but keep your chest in that sort of elevated place. You're going to eat the apples later. Okay? That puts you in a nice, erect posture, ready for singing where your rib cage is expanded. Now, while you're in that position, will you take one of your hands and block one of your nostrils and inhale? Let it out. Now block the other nostril. And release. Now block the opposite nostril. And let it out. And the opposite nostril. Go ahead and have a seat, please. One or the other of those nostrils was easier to breathe out of. Almost everybody has one side of their nose that's less effective than the other. And the reason that I wanted you to breathe through your nose and then just one nostril was because all of a sudden when the obstruction, when you found that place where you couldn't get breath easily, you discovered that your diaphragm worked harder. It had to pull air just a little bit. Whereas when you open your mouth or you open both nostrils or your nose and your mouth, air comes in easily, and so the diaphragm doesn't really have to work as hard. Now, what I wanted to do is to make your diaphragm work a little harder than normal so that you could see it at work. Here's another way that you can do that. Those of you that are teachers, this is a tool that you can use. Imagine a martini straw and a thick milkshake. You've heard me say that before. And try to suck that milkshake through that martini straw. And you'll really feel your diaphragm work hard. You can feel it tugging, trying to get the air in across an obstruction. Those who are asthmatic know exactly what I'm talking about, the labor that it takes to pull air through an obstructed airway. They know what their diaphragms are. Most of us, we've got so much air we don't know what to do with it, and so we never really learn the process by which we breathe. So the two elements that I wanted Butch to feel, and you did feel them, but I wanted you to see, and that was that there are two opposing sets of muscles. One of the diaphragm, but you now know what your diaphragm acts like when you inhale, don't you? You know, you've isolated it. You've got a way that you can go and practice that. And then as he kept his diaphragm in a low position, he discovered all of a sudden that there was something going on in his lower abdomen, a contraction inward and upward to give strength to the exhalation when he's singing. And that's the part that many people, if they don't learn it, it's a learned ability. It's a learned skill to control the exhale of your breath. And there are several ways that you can do that. One of them is leaning up against a book, against the wall. And why do you do that? Because right away you discover when you're collapsing into the wall and your diaphragm gives way. And I'm ready to bet that 95 to 98 to 100% of you in this room would fall into that category. That as you begin to exhale, your diaphragm would cease to stay in its low position, and you would find yourselves falling in toward the wall the moment that you start to sing. And yet, by allowing their diaphragm to go soft and flaccid on you, you lose the ability to control the exhalation of your breath. So you start resorting to other tools, such as the upper rib cage, opening and closing the ribs, raising and lowering the shoulders, things like that, which in their own way can accomplish it, but are enormously less efficient than the system that I'm showing you. Question?
You spoke of asthmatic a while ago. Is there anything that can be done if you have asthma that would help?
Yes, it's actually a medication issue. But I personally, I'm not a doctor of medicine, but I personally believe that often asthma is triggered by anxiety as well, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that. And so one of the things that an asthmatic tries to do is to avoid stressful environments. That's why there aren't very many asthmatics that are square dance callers, because it's a fairly stressful environment. And yet, if you can learn to manage your stress, you will be more successful. There are some physical things that you can do. You can learn how to strengthen your diaphragm. You can learn how to control the exhale of air so that the airways don't feel like they have to pinch closed in order to hold that air, either on the way in or on the way out.
I disagree with that, because I am asthmatic, and I'm not that stressful most of the time. So most of mine is just allergies that I'm allergic to everything, and I take allergy shots and the whole bit, and I don't think it has to do with me being too much anxiety. It's just the fact that I'm allergic to trees, pollens, grass, goats, cats, dogs, horses, everything out there. And at certain times of the years, I have a lot more problems breathing because of that. This time of year is one of the bad times for me. Yeah. And now, anxiety is once you start having an attack, then that can cause it to get worse. Sure. That part I agree with. Yeah. But I think some people have asthma that are just allergic to stuff, and it doesn't have anything to do with anxiety.
I agree with you. And so initially when I was saying that the most immediate thing that you do is you learn how to manage it by medication. You take things that will cause the airways to not close up, not constrict, not swell up so much, antihistamines that can cause the airways to stay more open. But by the same token, as you pointed out, once you've done that, there is always that other element that starts to happen, which is anxiety. And sometimes the anxiety is triggered because you can feel the airways closing and you can't do anything about it, and so that initiates a great deal of anxiety. But there is also another part of the literature that says that people who are anxious find those airways involuntarily spasming, and those folks just need to chill out. They need to learn the strategies to not be anxious. So yes, there is medication. That's the first line of defense. The second one is to stay away from the things that cause those things. It is really impossible to avoid those things. There are some side effects that you have to deal with in terms of the medication that allows you to breathe is also a little bit detrimental to the inside edges of your vocal folds because they have a tendency to dry you out a great deal. And maybe you and I will want to talk about that a little bit afterwards to see if there's some things that you can do to alleviate those pressures during that period of time. Incidentally, for an extended period of time, I gave myself allergy shots, too, because I thought I was allergic, and I had a doctor that thought I was, and it adversely affected my voice. And then I went to another doctor about 5 years later, and he says, "You're not allergic." I said, "Thank you very much." So I quit taking the shots, and I just learned how to sing differently, to not let the things get me down. Okay, Andrea.
Are you suggesting that we practice these breathing techniques all the time or just for singing purposes?
You need more breath when you sing, but it won't hurt you at all to have a little extra breath all the time. So I would suggest that for better living, you might want to do that. Doctors would say aerobic exercise is really good. It's good for your heart, it's good for your whole vascular system, and by the way, it doesn't hurt your singing as well. Let's put things in proper perspective, shall we? It's better that you stay alive than that you keep calling. Some of you may not agree with me, but the reality is that it's more important to stay alive than it is to call. Just give yourself the choice and see which one you choose. And so anything you can do to help your body to stay healthy longer, and one of them is to make sure that there's enough oxygen in your bloodstream so that you're not always in an acidosis kind of an environment, that you really do have plenty of oxygenation in your body, and better breathing habits will help that.
Okay, just to clarify, I'm a round dance cuer, so I'm looking for, not singing obviously, I'm looking for something to give me the breath to get through the cues and to have them come clearly and be able to get through them all with the breath, yeah.
Generally, round dance cuers don't have the dilemma that callers even have, and callers don't have the dilemma that other singers who have extended phrasing to do. The only time callers get in trouble is when their vanity causes them to want to phrase across two breaths. Oh, did I say that wrong? No, there's a certain sense of styling that leads you to want to do that. Roundance cuers, lacking that degree of vanity, just are interested in getting the cues across, and that being the case, yes, but you know, the reality is that people with microphones don't have to do the same kind of things that people without microphones do. Most of the people that I teach are trying to learn how to use their voices in a non-electronic way, in an acoustical way. And there are some issues there having very much to do with this very issue of breath threshold that makes them more keen on this issue than you guys need to be. What you're really needing is clarity in your tone. Muddiness of tone, either because of breathiness or because of tightness, will intrude on the ability of the audience to understand the commands that you give. If you have a quality in your voice that is irritating because of its tightness, then that will also put people off. They can hear what you say, but they don't want to hear what you have to say. And so you have the desire, the single most significant issue for you is to get the tone of voice that is such that people will enjoy listening to you, will respond to you, and you need to be able to create for yourselves the voice that people want to obey. They take pleasure in obeying rather than feeling crabby because you boss them around all the time. And that's a quality issue. And we're going there. In fact, it looks like we're ready to go there right now. The hands went bing. Yeah, Butch had a comment and a question.
I wanted you to follow up on her question as to exercises. Do you do it every day? Do you do it a couple of times a week? But the other question I had is, I have occasions where, like at church, I sing at church, and we don't use microphones. And I've been told by various people, if you go home and you practice calling, you should always practice with the microphone. You should not practice without the microphone because you learn to control your voice difference. What's your opinion on that?
There's several issues there. I'm going to sort of I'll stay back here and just kind of answer the question. Then I'll move back up front. Oh, no, I'll walk up front. Everybody turn around in their chairs. There are different skills that you have to use. And most of the time callers get used to their microphone so that they don't oversing. They don't overload the microphone. That's a wise choice to make. But if I take the microphone away, you still don't have any trouble hearing me, do you? Part of the reason for that is because I've trained myself to project my voice acoustically. And if I do that and I put it into the microphone, it all of a sudden sort of starts to overload. So I have to mute that a little bit. I would suggest to you, Butch, that you might want to practice away from the microphone for your church work, and other times when you'll just be singing for family and friends, and then you may want to use the microphone when you're practicing your calls. And get used to both, because there is a microphone technique. People who are popular singers, as you are, people who are nightclub singers, people who are Broadway singers, all are used to electronic amplification, and so therefore they use their voices in slightly different ways. They don't have to be quite as on as the people who are just doing it acoustically. In terms of the question you ask about practicing, following up here, how much should you practice this? Well, if you're wanting to learn a new skill, you need to practice it a lot. And I don't mean one time a day. I mean every other hour. But the truth is, you don't have to do it a lot. All it takes is returning your body to the remembrance of what the body is supposed to do. So, you're in the workplace. Every time you get up from your desk, or every time you come to sit down at your desk, you take 10 seconds and you go, and the guy in the next cubicle comes up over and says, "Are you okay?" Yeah. But you can do that kind of exercising without a lot of time spent. It's just give yourself every time you go to the kitchen sink, every time you go to wash your hands, just some little cue that throughout the day, every time you go get a drink of water, you do that sort of exercise. And you say, "But that's so noisy." Yeah, you're right. And so you don't have to make an SH. You can do it this way. You know the sensation, you know what it feels like. Or, here's another one that you can do. You just pant. If you were feeling what was going on in my body, you'd feel the little pulsation of my diaphragm, taking little snippets of breath and then letting it out. And those exercises will cause you to be more aerobically fit. Another option that you have, when nobody's watching, you go into every time you go into the bathroom stall, you make a fist and you lean up against the door where nobody can see you, and you push yourself away from the wall 6 times. Or when you get up in the morning, before you get dressed, get yourself a little thing, push yourself away from the wall 6, 8, 10 times. You do that, every other hour, maybe 4, 5, 6 times a day. Do 10 of them, but do 10 repetitions 6 times a day or 10 times a day. And you'll be surprised how quickly you'll get into shape doing that. To maintain that, you don't have to do it as much, but you'll like it so much that you'll do it anyway.
We're talking about voice preservation for singing, but you've been talking for quite a while, and you don't appear to have any strain in your voice. Are you using your diaphragm to talk?
I am very much. But you should also know that as of yesterday, I had laryngitis. So I was thinking, okay, this is going to be really interesting. But I'm about 60% of my normal health right now in terms of my voice. But I'm also being really careful and smart about how I use my voice. Here are the things that I'm doing. I am supporting in the same way that I was trying to get Mitch to support up against the wall, Butch up against the wall there. It's this kind of a sound rather than this kind of a sound. There, that has a foundation underneath it. I can feel myself do it. There are some other tuning things that I do here. But before I get there, I'm wanting to make sure always that I'm staying on my breath threshold. Why? Because when I drop below my threshold, I leak. And in leaking, I either wear out, tire, or I tighten and I also tire. Because both of those approaches are inefficient. And so if I learn where my threshold is, and then that's where my voice speaks at its most genuine, its most efficient, and its least effort. So let me just drive that point home. 80% of your battle, maybe more, 80% of your battle is learning how to find that breath threshold. That you don't have to have lessons to do that. You can find it on your own. It helps if somebody else who's adept at it can say, oh, there you are, you're almost there, you just dropped below. Is it possible to go over the breath threshold? No. Because the more air you put in, the more the suction will make your voice increasingly efficient. All that will happen when you hit that threshold and go beyond it is that you'll just get louder, because there'll be more vigor of air passing through your vocal folds. So there's no danger of going over the threshold, but there's always perpetual common danger of dropping below that threshold. Question and comment?
If you know how to do all these things, why did you get laryngitis? And what did you do you do something with medicine or to get it over with it quicker? Why would you ever get laryngitis?
Because I got sick. I got a virus. And I got grandkids, and a runny nose came on my shoulder and then moved its way into my body. And how did I know? Because of the color of the stuff I was spitting up. Right? And then the laryngitis came because of the coughing that came as a result of having to expel this stuff out of my chest. And I just took some medicine, and tried to get as much rest and as much fluid in myself as I could. We haven't talked about fluid. Let's talk about fluid. Hydration is a big deal. If you're not drinking a gallon of water a day, you're not drinking enough. And if you get any kind of exercise, you ought to maybe go 2 gallons a day. Anybody try to drink 2 gallons of water a day? Yikes, it's scary, isn't it? Yeah, you have to work at it. You have to intend it. And after a while, your bladder starts to complain, and you have to go to the bathroom more frequently. But the reality is that there are toxins that build up in your body. The natural system, excuse me, the natural system for taking care of those toxins is to go to the bathroom. Through the urine are all the toxins carried. And they either build up a lot and then get expelled rarely, in which case you end up with kidney stones over the duration of your life, or you keep lots of fluids going through you, You go to the bathroom frequently and you pee pale. You've heard me say that before. Your urine should be clear or almost clear. And if it's not, you're not drinking enough. But all that happens to you is that you continue to rehydrate your body and give plenty of liquid so that all of the toxins that are needed can pass out of your body. Drink lots of water. Alcoholic beverages don't count. Carbonated drinks don't count. It's got to be water, juice, milk, but it might as well be water. Just drink lots. Time out. For most of my professional career, I didn't know that principle. And so I would continually wear down. Because in addition to just the regular hydration, there is a membrane that covers your vocal folds. It's called a mucosal membrane. And every time you inhale, or heaven forbid, smoke, you send, in smoking, hot air, hot dry air, across your vocal folds. And so that really moist membrane, which is the part of your vocal folds that should be doing the vibrating, gets dry and the mucus on it gets sticky and it becomes sort of glue-like. And then instead of a well-lubricated automobile, you have sludge on your vocal folds and you start to have trouble. And anybody who knows about cars knows what happens when you don't change your oil frequently, or you get the wrong grade in there, or there gets to be sludge in the engine, and pretty soon the pistons don't run as readily as they used to, and the engine is working too hard to produce what it does. And that's the same thing that happens in your vocal folds. If you don't have enough liquid in your body, then the mucosal membrane will start to dry out. And then when it starts to flap against itself on the other side, it will have stickiness so that it won't open and close readily, or dryness where it will chafe against. And then you start to get things like polyps, which are blisters, or nodes, which are like calluses on your vocal folds. So hydration is a big deal. There's a comment and a question, then we'll come back here in the front.
When I'm singing, I don't like drinking cold water. I try and keep a bottle of lukewarm water. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, there is. The question, and it's also equally as true for hot drinks. First of all, you should all know, I've mentioned this in past seminars, the liquids that you take don't touch your vocal folds. You all know what happens when when somebody says, I got to have a hot cup of coffee to warm my voice up? You know what you do when you get liquid down the wrong pipe? Hot liquid down the wrong pipe? That's the pipe where your vocal folds are, on your way to your lungs. Your esophagus, which leads to your stomach, is right behind there, and you've got a little flap, little cartilage, an epiglottis that slaps closed to cover the opening to your lungs so that you won't aspirate something and kill yourselves while you're swallowing, right? And so liquids that you drink never come in contact with your vocal folds. They never come in contact with your vocal folds. If you do, you gag, sputter, spurt, and cough. So the old notion that you take hot coffee to warm up your vocal folds, you think about that is like the biggest oxymoron in the world. You don't want any hot drink touching your vocal folds. It goes somewhere else. So the lady mentioned about cold drinks. Anybody know what happened to you when you jump into cold water? Certain parts of your body shrink? Yeah. I used to go up and direct an opera program up in Michigan for about 6 years while my kids were small. And the first time we went there, we thought, oh, there's this beautiful lake, and it's June. No, it was Lake Michigan, and the ice had just left there about 3 weeks before. And so my wife jumped in, and yikes, she was out of there before she hit the water. And so a couple of weeks later, there was another fellow on the staff that I went to, and I said, so is the water cold today? And how cold is the water? And he said, it's about this cold. Just think what he was... Well, that same sort of thing can happen in your vocal folds. You take really cold drinks, the area, all this area around will sort of contract against the coldness. It may give you a little rush, to make you feel cooled off. But I'd say if I were you, I'd do like this lady does. I wouldn't take cold ice drinks while I'm singing. Instead, I'd take tepid, room temperature drinks. They're not nearly as satisfying in the sense of making you feel cooled off. But the truth is that drink that you take at that point won't do your vocal folds a whit of good. Not a whit of good. It'll moisten your mouth, but it won't do any good on your vocal folds. It usually takes, you watch, if you go watch yourself go to the bathroom the next time, and if you've got a really yellowish stream of urine, and you start right now to hydrate, it will be 24 to 36 hours before you're fully hydrated. Right? So that drink that you're taking to make sure that your vocal folds stay moist, it's not doing them any good at that moment. But the drink that you took 2 days ago is doing its good. But if you just keep it up and get in the habit of it, you'll stay perpetually hydrated. Question here at the back.
What kinds of things can we do to protect our vocal cords, to treat them well, and what kinds of things do we do to damage them? And second part of this question, when you're in a performance, you have no way of getting out of it, you're the one who has to do the singing or the calling or whatever, and you can't get out of it, and you're sick and nothing's working right, what can you do to make things best?
Thanks. Well, one of the things you can do to quick answer to that question is just do patter calls. A whole night of patter calls. Don't sing. Because I'll talk to you a little bit about the whole process. I was hoping to have a chalkboard or a whiteboard, and maybe next period I can get one so I can draw your vocal folds for you so you can see them. So I'm just going to describe them. Now let's see. There were two parts to your question. The first question was, how can you take care of? Drink plenty. Rest. Don't be using your voice all the time. Third thing that you can do is to make sure that you stay on your breath threshold all the time and never drop below it. The problem is we all drop below it all the time. All the time. Most of us are below that threshold significantly all the time. It's a new learning curve to get to where you're using enough breath so that the vocal folds will spontaneously vibrate. Things that you do to hurt yourself. Talk over automobiles while you're driving to your calling assignments. Cars generate an enormous amount of noise, even the silenced ones, and talking over that noise can wear you down very, very much. Talking in noisy crowds, like square dances. Of course, you've got a microphone, but when you get off the microphone, don't blab. Don't go chit-chat. Or if you do, just make sure you stay on your breath threshold, right, so that you're not having to use the muscular energy of your throat to squeeze through too little amount of air. There is another thing that almost all of us do that we should unlearn to do, and it has to do with the English language that we speak. First of all, the English language that we Americans speak is a very guttural, throaty sound. I'll show you what I mean. Now I'm going to speak to you in English, but I'm going to place my voice in a different place. Do I sound like I'm American right now? No, because my vowels sit in a different place, and you might think, well, is he British? No, he's not British because it isn't quite right, but there's something distinctive and weird about the way that he talks. And all it is that the vowels